You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. My name is Troy Singer with Ring Digital, here with my friend and co-host Bart Kaler of Kaler Solutions. And what do you know? We have a wonderful conversation regarding scaling AI in higher ed, lessons from ASU's AI integration. Today we're talking to Tina Miller of Arizona State University. She serves as the Executive Director of Creative and Communications. Bart, you met Tina at AMA and was blown away by her presentation and felt we need to get her on the podcast to help get the information continuously out about how AI should be scaled and we should go from AI literate to AI fluent.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Tina, and I just am continuing to be the more I'm with her. She sat in on a couple of the roundtables that I had led on AI, and then I sat in on her presentation. And just one of those things, and I've followed her and Arizona State. They are the leading institution in AI adoption. They are leading it forward. OpenAI, ChatGPT came to them to help figure out how to create an education product, Chat EDU. They came to them last year. And so this is just, if you want to hear what's going on in higher ed with AI, this is the conversation.
Yes. Here's our conversation with Tina Miller. Tina, we start every episode by asking our guests to share something that they have learned recently that might be interesting to hear by our audience. So, do you have something that you would like to share to get our conversation going?
Of course. So at Arizona State University, my team produces a show called Carpool Convos. And what we do is because the Phoenix market is the largest Waymo market of autonomous driving vehicles in the country. And so what we do is we put our CIO, Lev Gonick, in the back of a Waymo, and then he interviews certain leaders either at ASU or across the tech sector. And so this week, he interviewed Shireen Gabriel, who is our Executive Vice President of ASU Health, which is going to revolutionize health, not just for the students and faculty, but also just for the greater Arizona community and the region as a whole. And one of the things that Shireen talked about that I thought was really interesting is she said that it's not just that you can go to med school to become a doctor, but how AI is actually influencing a lot of that. And now what we're doing with ASU Health is not only will a graduate from ASU Health have a doctorate or a medical degree, but they will also have another degree in engineering. And so because it's not just about medicine, it's also about understanding data and analytics and how those all work together. And what she also said in that interview was that AI is not going to replace your doctor, but a doctor who knows how to use AI will replace those who don't. Yep. And so now there is a big push in the medical industry to not just know medicine, but to know how to incorporate it with technology for diagnostics, for better predictions to patients, and just for overall better patient health care.
Wow, thank you. That's a great way to start off our conversation. And for everyone, Bart met Tina at the AMA conference a couple of months ago and attended an AI session that you did, Tina, and raved about it and was excited to have you on the podcast to talk about scaling AI in higher ed and lessons from ASU's AI integration. And that was a great way to kick it off. I do have a specific question of a road we would like to go down. AI is becoming more prevalent in higher ed, as we all know. What excites you most about AI's potential to enhance in learning and operations?
I think think for me, what it is in the past, traditionally, students would either come to class and they would, you would have the professor or the faculty member stand in front of the class and then maybe they might do some work up the side or they may be working online, but it really wasn't meeting the student where they're at. And so for me, I'm really excited about AI because of all the possibilities of where we can now actually really improve a student's learning experience through AI, through doing, all kinds of things. We're working on a digital twin campus of our main campus in Tempe, Arizona, so that we, for students who might be interested in coming and touring our campus, but they might be bound by, financial reasons or geography or whatever, we can actually, it's in the works, it's not there yet, but we can start bringing these services and experiences to students who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate.
That's pretty exciting, and as I've learned a lot about what ASU is doing and how you're leaning into all things generative AI, and you did a great example there at the beginning with just the healthcare, and I know that there was a document that you recently published that I read that talks about just all the different aspects. So when we're talking about AI at ASU, it's not just in the classroom, it's not just in operations, it's becoming the lifeblood of everything that ASU is doing. Yeah. Part of my question, kind of a follow-up on this, is when schools start thinking about this, they're hearing that, they're like, oh, that's wonderful, that's great. Well, one thing, ASU is one of the largest institutions in the country. Two, how are you getting everybody on board? Because a lot of schools are like, my faculty aren't even interested in having the conversation. Mm-hmm. How are you all leading that? Especially, I know your CIO is a big part of that. How are you all navigating some of the challenges of bringing everybody along?
Yeah. Well, so it really started back in, and I think you heard me tell this story, Bart, in my presentation, that when I came, so I'm the executive director of creative and communications for enterprise technology. That's the IT division of Arizona State University. So all the AI communications, we partner with our media relations team, but it really originates from us. And so when I interviewed for this job back in the summer of 23, AI wasn't even mentioned. And then as soon as I took the job, Lev Gonick, our CIO, said, okay, Dr. Crow, President Crow, wants a list of every single AI project that's been done. So it was a 110 slide deck that kind of explained some of these things. And we started with storytelling. We just started by saying, here are some cool, fun AI projects that are going on. And then from there, we built a team. They created the executive team created a strategic plan with it. And we really started getting buy-in that way. So it really did start at the top. President Crow is a believer in AI, and it really, you have to start at the very top in order to get that engagement. And then we also launched the AI Innovation Challenge. We partnered with OpenAI. We were the first major university higher ed institution to do that in last January, where we worked with them to provide ChatGPT. At that point, it was the enterprise model. Now it's flipped to EDU. But we then allowed our faculty, researchers, and staff to submit proposals for how they would use ChatGPT to provide an impact in 3 different ways. This is the secret sauce of AI for ASU. Either it has to have an impact on teaching and learning success, it has to make an impact on research for societal impact, or the future of work. And so it's those 3 things. And if it doesn't fall into one of those 3 buckets, then we really have to determine, is this worth it for us to pursue?
I like that. I like putting some guardrails around that, and I'm just going to try to pull some things out of this because I want our listeners to make sure they walk away with the most on this. So, making sure that you've got some specifics on what you're trying to do. It's one thing to just say, hey, we expect everybody to kind of start using AI. What you're going to get is a lot of people saying, oh, I've been able to improve my email. It sounds better now. And it's like, well, no. That's the smallest thing you can do with AI. And so I like the fact that you've got those buckets that you do. But I also really like, and again, I'm going to go back, and I've seen data on this too. There's been research that shows when leaders adopt AI first, the rest of the community will follow. It's one of those things that you've really got to have not only the leaders champion it, but they also have to be the ones that are excited about it because they see what it means. And I think that you guys are demonstrating that really well. I know that, and during your talk, you talked about a digital twin, and I'll get back to that in a second. But the digital twin of your CIO, maybe explain a little bit about what you did with that. I think that's fascinating.
Oh, thank you. So, as I mentioned, our CIO is Lev Gonick. He's got 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. I'm sure some of your listeners or viewers have heard of him. But, Lev is this techno-optimist, and he is a futurist. So, one of the things that I decided to create was a chat bot that has our CIO's voice, and I named it the Gonick Guru. So, what I did is I took a lot of his, he travels all across the globe giving speeches and presentations on AI. He is a constant presence, in the media circuit. And so I took his media interviews, I took his speeches, I took things that he wrote, because he also has a PhD. I took that and made it into a big corpus of information and uploaded that to ChatGPT EDU and created this chatbot. So then whenever I need to get a quote from him, if we're doing any type of a story, or I just need his insight on a project I'm working on, I can just put that into Gonick Guru, and it will come back out and say, well, this is how the Gonick Guru feels about the future of AI and learning, and he loves it. He goes and he'll send me stuff. Can you put this in there? And he'll go in and ask himself questions. So he really likes it. It's really just something that our team uses.
Right.
But I would encourage your listeners or your viewers, if you do work with an executive for an extended period of time, and you have to get quotes from them, or you need their opinions on things, it's really easy to set it up, and it really does provide it provides some assistance and support when you're trying to find that perfect quote.
Yeah, my team last summer set up the Ask Bart custom GPT. They took my book, they uploaded it, they uploaded all the episodes of our podcast. We've blogged for 10 years. They've uploaded all that. So that's the same type of thing. They'll go in and ask, hey, a client asked about this. What would you say? And it will give a pretty good idea. And then they'll run it past me, and I'm reacting to it, which is much better than them saying, hey, can you answer this question, where I've got to start from nothing. And so, it's a really powerful thing as an executive, as well as it's a little humbling too. I'll admit that.
Well, we started with the AI acceleration team, which is they're the group at ASU. Elizabeth Riley is my colleague who leads that. They're the ones building all these platforms and tools for us internally. And one of their first projects is they created a Crowbot, which was from President Crow. But that is under wraps. Nobody is allowed to use it. It was kind of a beta, like the first thing they tried, but it isn't for public consumption.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. One thing I wanted to tease out a little bit on something else you said earlier about the digital twin of the campus. Mm-hmm. So one thing I think is interesting, because I'm reading into this, but part of generative AI, I think everybody thinks about ChatGPT and some of the other things, but it is going to expand into virtual reality and augmented reality and things like that. So tell me about how you're starting to look at those different types of technologies, especially as you're developing this digital twin of Tempe.
Yeah, the best example I can give you, Bart, is Dreamscape Learn at Arizona State University. And so what it is we have taken the VR experience and we have put that into what's called the Alien Zoo, and that is for biology students. And so they can go into the lab, they put on their goggles, and they actually learn. It's like a fictitious zoo, and it's like a dinosaur thing, and she's not feeling well. And so they go through the diagnostics and they try to figure out, okay, what can we administer to her? And then when they administer certain medicine, they can actually see in her body where it goes and how it is healing and helping. And then we're taking that. Our next step in that is being more multimodal with that. So we're actually immersing our students into that space. And then now what we're working on is the multimodal piece of there could be a chatbot that comes up, and the student can ask a question to the chatbot, and the chatbot will respond. And it can, the student can ask, okay, take me to another vision or another version of this, like another way to look at it visually. And so we're working on that now. But that's really, I think, the future of teaching and learning is immersing students, because we have to remember, this generation is very much about gamifying. They're very much about short, quick things that they can involve themselves in. And so that's what we're looking at ASU, is how can we continue to find immersive experiences with our students, because we know that's where they're at and that's where we want to meet them.
Tina, you mentioned earlier about the custom GPT that you have for, was it your president or your CIO?
Our CIO. Well, both. They both have one, but yeah.
Very good. Well, we'd like for you to go a little deeper about how you're using GPTs and Chat EDU to assist leadership with speech writing, messaging, and some other use cases.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so my team, we use a variety. So like I said, we're the creative and communications team, and so we're always looking at ways that we can improve our work. And so we do everything from brainstorming ideas. We're in the process of creating a new AI journey book. Your audience and viewers can find more information about our AI journey at ai.asu.edu. So we're creating a book for that. Brainstorming ideas, building the custom GPTs. We do job descriptions. There's some. I've had some new people come onto my team, and so we look at job descriptions to say, okay, how can we infuse some AI-related work into this? Because as we go forward, we're looking for people that have used these tools, and especially on my team, which we do basically the marketing and communications for IT. We ask it to generate certain images just for internal purposes. And one of the cases I love the most is we had about 10 videos that we had to do, like really quick videos, and we had 80 pages of transcripts. We had to do 10 videos, 80 pages of transcripts. And what I did is I put that into ChatGPT and I said, okay, here are the 10 different video topics, find who said what about it, what the timestamp is, and then write a script. And it did it in less than 3 minutes. And then we went through, of course, and looked at the scripts and determined what we could keep and what we need to redo. But that saved my team probably a week's worth of work in 3 minutes.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the efficiencies and the enhancement. That's one thing we talk a lot about is not only are you going to gain some efficiencies, but can you become a better writer? Can you become a better videographer because you're using these tools? And so it's fascinated me when I first met you and you were talking a little bit about the Chat EDU and the partnership with OpenAI. Maybe talk a little bit about how that came about and how that has been important for that product to be developed, because I know that a lot of other schools can have access to that now, but what does that do that's different from the typical ChatGPT?
Yeah. So OpenAI, like I said, they came to us probably in January of last year in 2024 and said, we want to partner with a higher ed institution to build out ChatGPT EDU. This is going to be a new, thing we're going to offer higher education institutions. Arizona State University has been the #1 university in the country for innovation for 10 years in a row. We're very proud of that. And so we said, okay, we'll start working with you on that, because what OpenAI wanted to know was how could we utilize this? How can we get this into the hands of more people? What would they, at the university setting, what would they be doing with it? How could it improve, teaching and learning? And so what we did is we decided that with OpenAI, they gave us a certain amount of licenses. We have 181,000 students, by the way, at Arizona State University, and about 24,000 staff and faculty. So it would be a little expensive to give it to everybody. I don't think the Arizona Board of Regents would approve that. But so what we did is we said, okay, we're going to have a set amount of licenses, and then we focused on impact, and that's very important, because a lot of, you might see colleges, universities, companies giving out ChatGPT and saying, here, use it, but what are they using it for? And that's what we decided to be very intentional to say, okay, we have a set amount of licenses, but we want to make an impact in 3 areas at Arizona State University: student and teaching success, research for societal impact, and the future of work. And so we set out on what we called the AI Innovation Challenge, and we invited faculty, staff, and researchers to submit and say, okay, I have a project that I want to submit so I can use ChatGPT to improve, how my students are writing in their English class, and comparing and comparing how they write to how ChatGPT would write. So we did that. We've had 4 challenges. Over 600 proposals have been sent in, and about 400 active projects right now. Some of them have had to be extended, but then we're looking at, okay, out of those projects, which ones can we scale that we can actually offer to the rest of our community? And so that's what we're still in the throes of that, but that was kind of the catalyst for us working with OpenAI.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that they were forward thinking enough to get engaged with higher ed. We had Dr. Jules White on the podcast a few months ago talking about what's going on at Vanderbilt. And, he talked a little bit about how they were approaching it with their Amplified Gen AI. And if people are kind of curious about how to, implement at scale for your university, what Tina just said, and as well as what we talked about with Dr. White is a good way to look at that. But as I think about this and I think about just that scaling and rolling it out. And I love the fact that you're asking for those research papers, because it kind of reminds me of back in the 60s and 70s when you'd have to reserve time on the computers at an institution. But what have been some of the most effective strategies as you roll out these AI-powered initiatives? I mean, as departments kind of start getting on board, I mean, certainly it's going to obviously come out of some of the where you would think first, IT, then, moving into some of the STEM and things like that. But how is that rolling out, and how are you making sure that rolls out to, to all of the different departments? I mean, how is that getting played out in the liberal arts and some of the humanities?
Yeah. Well, I think I would say it depends, because we do not have a community-wide statement that says you will use AI. Right. And so what we had to do at Arizona State University is first and foremost create the guidelines around it to say, okay, if you use it, because faculty have academic freedom. They can choose to use it, they can choose not to use it. And so for us, we did create those guidelines, and that helped. And so my team created, and we collaborated with plenty of people across the community, but my team created and manages the AI website. So we wanted to do that first, like to have a single source of truth about AI that everybody could go to find out things about what ASU is doing. So that's ai.asu.edu, and that was kind of one of our first things. In addition to, the senior leadership team got together and said, we're going to go forward with this, and then they also started creating communities of practice under teaching and learning, and some of those communities of practice have really flourished, especially like the teaching and learning communities. And some other ones have, kind of languished a little bit. So it just depends. But those communities of practice are the ones that are responsible for looking into how can we responsibly use this? What are some of the other areas? And so that has also helped to kind of make it almost like not a ground up, but also to say, okay, people on the front lines are, how are you implementing this? Because there is no blanket statement that everybody at ASU has to use it. So we have the website, we have our communities of practice, we have our guidelines that are, like I said, that are actually on our ai.asu.edu website. And then we just, again, we kind of married all of it with storytelling. And so that's what we, I would say, my team, 1 out of every 2 of our stories are about AI. And so we really try to get out as much as we can. We engage with other divisions and enterprises that are also doing things in AI. I mean, it is impossible. We are doing so many things. It's impossible to keep up with everything that we're doing because for us, innovation isn't really necessarily sticking to a strategic plan. It's just trying things, experimenting, failing, learning, and moving forward. Like we don't have, we really do kind of have a culture at ASU of, just try it. Like, you try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, okay, learn from it, and let's keep moving. And that's what innovation is. Innovation, doesn't have a roadmap. And so you got to try things to see what works and what doesn't. And there's, been some things we probably have implemented that didn't go as well, but I can't really give you total examples, but I know they're out there. So it's just been consistent. It's just been consistent movement forward.
Yeah. I'm curious, and before we get on, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the practical use and best practices, but I'm a little bit curious, certainly Chat EDU is kind of like, the official one that you all are using, but with your creative team, what are some of the other tools that your creative team is using as well?
So we use a variety of tools. When I came to enterprise technology in the summer of 23, I knew that this was going to be a big thing. And so I told my team, I want everybody to be using at least 2 generative AI tools by the end of October 23. And I think we're now using way more than that. But, for writing, editing, and content, we definitely use ChatGPT EDU. We love Grammarly, WordTune. We use Otter AI. We have, two writers on our team. And so they will use Otter AI for their interviews and transcripts. And we use Canva, Firefly, Midjourney. We also use something called Natural Reader, which is really helpful when we're creating copy. You can put your copy in there and it will read it back to you and see if you have any things that are misspelled. But the other thing, too, that isn't something that is available to a tool that is only available to ASU is I mentioned we have an AI acceleration team that's led by my colleague Elizabeth Riley, and they have created what is called the Create AI platform. And so it's a platform that is only for ASU. We have over 50 large language models on it. We have a My AI Builder tool where people can go and build their own chatbots. And so we're starting to use that a lot too. And on that, I created what was called the spin cycle. And what I did is I took 2 years worth of stories that we did, because we're a storytelling organization, and I put all those into the spin cycle. And then now we have this great tool that we can use. Like if we want to do a follow-up story, let's say we did a story about a professor like Jacob Green 2 years ago on AI. If we want to do a follow-up story, we might get into the spin cycle and say, okay, what did we say? What are some of the ways we can update this story and take it in a new direction? And so we're starting to use that too, just as a thought partner and as an additional storyteller on our team, is just to kind of help us focus our storytelling.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're encouraging your teams to really lean into that, because I know that that's sometimes where there's, depending on where you're at, and it's like this everywhere, there's fear at different places on, where is this going to be?
Yeah.
Is AI going to take my job? And your point earlier about the doctors that have AI, that type of thing. And so I think that that's such a really good thing to think about.
Yeah.
Moving forward with more practical AI application recommendations, Tina, beyond leadership and support messaging, what are some of the other ways ASU is applying AI across campus?
There are several. First of all, I would say first and foremost, develop a comprehensive strategy that aligns with the institution's policies. And so, for example, for us at ASU, our charter is all about that we measure success by who we include, not who we exclude. And so, it's so that inclusive excellence is at the heart of ASU. And so that was what we wanted to make sure, is that we created a comprehensive strategy that spoke to our charter, meaning inclusivity for all. Anybody who wants to, have this technology should have a right to use it. And so that's first and foremost. I would also say, develop clear policies. So but back up for that, you need to make sure that your leadership is aligned. And that right there is one of the biggest challenges right now that my marketing and communications colleagues at higher ed institutions across the country is there's varying levels of leadership adoption. So that's important to get your leaders on board. Develop clear policies. And another thing that we do at ASU, we do really, really well, is we embrace partnerships. And so we partner with AWS and Apple and OpenAI and Google and all these tech companies and other companies, because partnerships fuel innovation, and we're a very innovative university. And then I would say, last but not least, figure out, what does your community want to use AI to solve for? Is it to increase student success? Is it to, is there other things that, for greater employee satisfaction or whatever it is? But just make sure you understand for your institution, what do you want AI, how do you want it to be used, and what is the ultimate goal that you want to achieve?
I like that, because that kind of dovetails into what you said earlier about those 3 questions that you're asking when people are submitting their requests to do the AI projects. And I think that having clear articulation of who you are as an institution, not only does that kind of roll out into the way you do your marketing, your branding, and everything else, but it also helps you make decisions on how you're going to implement things like AI adoption. How are you going to roll that out? How are you going to make sure that you've got the proper guidelines and the safety nets in for your different folks on that? So I really, really like the way that you're kind of suggesting that for different people. I know a lot of people are following up with you at other institutions and those challenges, and so I appreciate you sharing that. One question I have before we kind of wrap everything up is, how are you seeing AI shaping in the next 2, 3, 5 years? I did a class last night. I've been teaching a class, and the final class was, hey, here's the future. I did the same class back in August, and I had, here's 1 to 3 months out, or here's the next year, and everything had already been achieved. I'm like, okay, I didn't realize that things would happen that quickly. As you know, things happen fast, but where do you think things are going to go in just the next few years?
Well, they're talking about they meaning everybody in the technology industry who they are.
Yeah.
I'm talking about agents, and I really do think that's where we're going. At ASU, we are starting to experiment with some agent work in our Create AI platform. It is not anything that is widely available at all right now, but that's what we're looking into. And I could see that is something that a lot of marketing and communications teams, once they can, wrap their arms, their brains around how to use AI for their institution, I think the introduction of agents is really going to change a lot of things for us, not only just personally, but also, professionally, and how we look at our teams and how our teams are organized. Because if you have an agent, if you have somebody who can do some of those menial tasks, then that frees up your team to do more strategy and to do other things that are more creative. And so I really think that's where we're going to go in less than probably 3 years, because we're starting to see those experiments across the board.
And just for the sake of some of our audience, could you explain agent? I mean, certainly that's something that you're passionate about as far as that's what's next. Just give us an example of what that is.
Well, it's really the way that you can think about it is having, you have everybody right now on your team doing specific tasks. You might have somebody who writes copy. You might have somebody that creates the ads. You might have somebody that writes press releases. And so what an agent does, you have an overall agent who is given the goal, or, let's say it's, to create a new marketing campaign for an institution. So that's the overall goal. And then what happens is that agent will then assign one linear task to a sub agent. So you might have one person who is drafting, you might have one agent that is drafting A/B copy. And then the next, you might have another agent that's looking at where are the best ways that we can utilize a $200,000 spend, on advertising. And then another one, might be looking at, how to write social media copy. And so it's really just employing, and again, they usually only do one task, but it's employing agents to work on your behalf.
Yeah, during our AI summit, Dan Sanchez did a great job of, kind of introducing that concept. He had a, pie chart of the future or not an org chart of the future, where he had like every person that's a human in your organization will probably have 3, 4, 5 agents that work with them specific to that subject matter expertise that they're bringing. And so he always likes to talk about, if you can delegate it, AI can do it. And so the idea that, getting our mindset into that as we get ready to roll these agents out, I think is such a critical way to think about it and to start leaning into understanding this more. So Tina, one of the things too that I know is really important to ASU is just this idea of principled innovation. You and I have talked a little bit about that. Can you share that and why that's so important to ASU?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking. So principled innovation is really the lens by which we innovate everything. So we ask ourselves the question, we can innovate, but should we? And so we put it through this lens of we do no harm to our community, but are we innovating just for the sake of innovating, or are we actually providing real value to our students, to our faculty, staff, to our community? And so that allows us to have a better ethical understanding, because, at the core of everything, again, is our charter about being inclusive rather than exclusive. But it's also about making sure that we're innovating responsibly and that we're doing it for the better of our community.
That's great. I love that. That's a really good way to frame all of this, and really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Tina, as we close out, would love to ask you for one final piece of advice or insight that our listeners, as they receive it, might be able to apply in their world immediately.
Yeah. For me, I'm big on understand the difference between literacy and fluency. And so you can be AI literate, meaning you can use a different tool every day. You know how to use a large language model. You know how to cut and paste and make a great email. That's great. But, that's being literate. But being fluent means how can you take these models and use them, for better comprehension, better reasoning, better understanding. And that also relates to our students. It's not, a majority of our students are using AI tools. We know that, but again, that's nice, but that they're literate. But how can we teach our students fluency? How can we how can we teach them to use these models so when they get into the workforce, they're going to offer more value to their employers? And so being literate is the first step, but being fluent, that's really where the magic happens.
That's awesome. Love that.
Tina Miller, Executive Director of Creative and Communications at Arizona State University, thank you for taking us through that wonderful AI conversation. For those that would like to continue that conversation with you, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Oh, great. Well, I am on LinkedIn. And then also I would encourage your listeners and viewers to follow us at Technology at Arizona State University.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And we will put that information in the show notes so everyone will have it.
Yeah.
You've given some wonderful information, and we're going to have a lot of it within the show notes. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Bart, your final words before we wrap it up today.
Yeah, this is such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed having Tina on the show, and thank you for agreeing to come. It's one of those things, and people who know me know I'm a passionate person about generative AI, and anything that we can see to how to get people to move from literacy to fluency, it's an amazing tool. I think you need to lean into it. If you're just literate right now, really encourage you to become fluent in it. It's going to change your life, and it's really a great thing and a great opportunity, and it's what a great time to live, to be able to experience this. And so I just really would encourage, if there are things you don't understand in this episode or you want to have more questions, be sure to reach out to Tina. Reach out to me if you want to. And we just want to make sure that this is, I kind of jokingly talk about being an AI evangelist. I mean, I'm a tech optimist. I think there's a lot of opportunities here. I was telling somebody the other day, I said, if there were no more advances in generative AI than today, I would be very happy, because there's a lot of things I could do.
I agree.
And so just really encourage you to kind of lean into this, and appreciate you being on the show today, Tina.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure.
The Higher Ed Marketer Podcast is powered by Kaler Solutions, your go-to partner for higher ed mission-fit marketing strategies, enrollment, and branding needs. And sponsored by Ring Digital, your ad targeting experts for higher ed, putting you in front of your specific prospects and inquiries with provable, measurable increases in lift and yield. On behalf of Tina, Bart, and myself, Troy Singer, wishing everyone happiness and success in higher ed.